where hidden truths meet defiance, grit, and survival. If you believe real leadership is forged in fire, not luxury, then hit that subscribe button. Like this video. Share it. Join us as we unearth a tale few dare to tell. The night before Ibrahim Traoré took office as president, someone tried to end his life. Ouagadougou's air pulsed with tension. Crowds gathered in hushed circles, holding candles, whispering prayers, not of celebration, but of protection. History's edge had arrived. Within 12 hours, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, barely past his mid-30s, was set to become Burkina Faso's transitional leader, a people's choice, and a threat to the establishment. He hadn't climbed through handshakes or photo ops. He had risen from trenches, from blood and grit, and because of that, some would rather see him dead than standing at that podium. In a rented safe house outside the capital, he sat at a wooden table under the dim glow of a kerosene flame. His uniform was plain. His revolver lay beside an aged map, marked with base coordinates, and 3 battle-worn notebooks, lists of allies, betrayers, and one page still blank. Across from him sat Salafo, a trusted friend, once his communications officer in the 10th Regiment. "You don't need to be here," Salafo said. "The High Council's offering full protection." Ibrahim looked up, eyes calm, unreadable. "Protection?" he asked. "From the same men I bled beside in the north?" He leaned in. "I don't need guards. I need the truth." Salafo stayed quiet. He knew this man. Ibrahim had outlived ambushes, outsmarted drones, survived betrayal. He didn't fear bullets. He feared delusion. But tonight was different. Even the wind held its breath. He said nothing, but his left hand moved instinctively to his sidearm. Not fear, just muscle memory. At exactly 2:14 a.m., everything went dark. No flicker, no warning, just silence. Streetlights vanished. Radio static died. Ibrahim didn't flinch. "Down," he whispered. Not yelled, not barked. Whispered. Salafo obeyed. In one motion, Ibrahim overturned the table, crouched, and drew his weapon. He counted silently. 5, 10. Then a sound. Soft rubber. Silencer boots. A shadow moved across the shuttered window. Then another. They weren't here for show. They were trained. Precise. No tanks. No squads. This was surgical. The door burst inward. Not loud, but fast. 2 masked men. Rifles up, scopes gleaming. They expected a sleeping target. What they found was a soldier primed for war. One turned toward the bedroom. Ibrahim fired. A single shot. Neck. Silent fall. The second ducked, reacted fast, and returned fire. Plaster exploded from the wall behind Ibrahim. He rolled, shielded by the table. Fired again. Shoulder. The intruder staggered, but stayed upright. Not dead. Not yet. Salafo bolted to the kitchen, grabbed a flare gun from beneath the sink. "No rounds," he yelled. "But I can fire a signal." Ibrahim nodded. "Do it." The flare screamed into the night sky. A few seconds later, gunfire cracked from nearby streets. Someone had seen the signal. But it wasn't enough. The wounded man triggered a beacon on his chest. Ibrahim recognized it instantly. Shortwave GPS. Connected to a relay tower. More were coming. Not a hit squad. An erasure unit. They weren't here to kill. They were here to erase. The second flare hadn't cleared the clouds. Before engines buzzed from the south. Not trucks. Low, tight engines. Armored bikes without lights. Ibrahim leaned against a hallway wall, blood dripping from a gash on his arm. Not a bullet, just a splinter from the shattered frame. He scanned the door. What he felt wasn't fear or adrenaline. It was focus, the same sense he'd had when a roadside bomb had nearly killed him, and he'd known by instinct where the real danger was. This wasn't sloppy. This wasn't desperation. This was elite. And those two weren't the whole threat. They were the opening. This mission hadn't failed. It had escalated. He didn't wait, didn't speak, just met Salafa's eyes and whispered, "We move now." and they slipped out the back. Seconds later, another pair of men dropped from the rooftop. Too late. They gave clipped radio bursts, calls for backup. But Ibrahim and Salafu were already gone, barefoot, bleeding, running through alleys, where breath steamed in the morning chill. They didn't head toward the palace. That route was a death trap. Instead, they darted into corridors of rusted roofs and garbage lanes, places only kids and ghosts dared move at night. And that saved them, because Ibrahim knew the city, not from maps or monitors, but from lived memory, from famine relief patrols, from militia raids, from secret visits to his mother's old street. And tonight, that memory became his armor. No security system beats a child. Not here. Not in Ouagadougou. And as they passed a courtyard, lined with drying cassava, a teenage boy, barefoot, shirtless, awake at 3 a.m., saw the look in Salafa's eyes, nodded once, and vanished into the dark, raising the alarm before the enemy reached the next corner. Darkness held for just half a minute before the whole quarter came alive. Doors flung open, radios hissed to life, buckets hit the ground like warning bells. It was a silent code. Disappear or relocate. Ibrahim dropped low behind a fruit cart, breath ragged, blood dripping, brain racing. He yanked the SIM from his burner, snapped it clean, and shoved a wristwatch into Salafa's palm. A green dot blinked steadily. If I don't make it, get this to Hel Lima in Sector 9. She'll know what's next. Salafu began to argue, but Ibrahim's stare silenced him. The same unshaken stare from the 2020 siege when he'd commanded a retreat under fire to save a group of trapped villagers, sacrificing friends he called brothers. That same look returned, not defeat, but devotion. They moved fast, darting through the maze of vendors and welding sheds until they reached a storm tunnel behind a deserted school. It was where Ibrahim once taught street kids how to defend themselves with empty hands. As they slid into the sewer's mouth, their pursuers arrived above, too late, but close enough that their bootsteps echoed down the pipes. That's when Ibrahim played his second card. He activated a fake signal built into his collar, a perfect mimic of his emergency beacon, and tossed it down a different shaft. Within seconds, the team above split, one squad following the false trail, the other flanking west. Ibrahim gritted his teeth, but this time it was a smile. Not pride, but the faint joy of having bought time. Every second counted if the future of the Republic was still breathing. They emerged beneath a mosque, through a narrow brick corridor dimly lit by candles and layered with the scent of prayer smoke. Ibrahim slumped briefly against the stone wall, not from weakness, but to acknowledge a small victory. No longer prey, but hidden prey. Waiting in the dark stood a figure, an elder with a faded scar and a low-held shotgun. Imam Dabo, a loyal relic of a violent past, the same man who shielded Ibrahim's mother during the 2016 food riots. He said nothing, just handed over a long cloak, fake ID, and a burner phone. They think you're gone, Dabo murmured. Don't prove them right. Ibrahim nodded once, cloaked himself, and walked into the incense-clouded hall. No one asked who he was or why he limped. They just offered him water and silence. There, beside a marble column, he finally whispered, not to the others, but to himself. If this is how far they go before I take the oath, what waits after? As the call to prayer floated toward a city still draped in sleep, Ibrahim Traoré understood something vital. Getting away wasn't enough. He had to reappear, not as a man who survived, but as a vision reborn. Survival made him flesh, but returning could make him fire. The mosque emptied before sunrise. Only traces of smoke, silence, and sandalwood remained. And as the city stirred to another routine morning above, deep beneath its skin, Ibrahim was already building his resurgence. Not through headlines, but through motion. He walked, not toward the Capitol dome, but to the disused armory by the old railway station. Officially condemned, guarded only by decay and dogs. But beneath the rust, Ibrahim had quietly made it a nerve center, run by 3 men who didn't owe him loyalty, only a future. No one saluted when he arrived through the back access hatch. They just stepped aside and handed him a folder marked EMB FX72. Inside, bank transfers, encrypted calls, security bypass logs, surveillance on foreign operatives dialing into the capital. Names, places, proof. He read it all without a flinch, not because he was numb, but because this confirmed it. This wasn't betrayal by a few, it was collaboration across borders. A quiet coup led by those who couldn't stomach the idea of an African leader who made decisions without approval. One page in particular, a €200,000 deposit to a shell account in Senegal tied to a private contractor with French intelligence links. Sealed it. Send it, Ibrahim said. A man beside him hesitated. If we go public now before you're sworn in, the interim council might shut it all down. Call it manipulation. Ibrahim turned, voice like a fuse. Then let the people decide if truth is political. The command was final. The three men activated the drop. Encrypted bursts sent to 24 journalists, watchdogs, and civic networks from Nigeria to Senegal, beyond interception, beyond recall. The palace still slumbered. The traitors still dreamed. But their grip had already loosened. And then Ibrahim made his boldest move. He walked outside. No disguise. No guards. Just him. In a white robe, face exposed, walking through a midday market. In moments, eyes widened. Phones rose. Murmurs spread. Someone shouted, "He's alive!" And what followed wasn't uproar, but awakening. People didn't run, they sang. Shopkeepers abandoned counters. Children climbed rooftops. Mothers whispered prayers of thanks. It wasn't panic. It was ignition. And Ibrahim Traoré kept walking, not to reclaim safety, but to claim destiny. By the time Ibrahim reached the entrance of the National Assembly, the crowd behind him had grown into a sea of thousands. The guards, sworn to those who'd orchestrated his death, stood still, caught between orders and instinct, unsure whether to salute or shoot. And in that pause, history shifted. Because Ibrahim didn't yell or demand to be let in. He only turned to the crowd and said, "You brought me here. Walk with me as I go forward." Then, alone, he stepped past rifles that never lifted, through gates meant to keep him out, into a chamber that had conspired to erase him. When he faced the interim council, his clothes still marked with dried blood, his voice steady, he said only, "You claimed I would not live to see this day. Yet I stand here not through your mercy, not by your leave, but because the people refused to let my voice disappear." And no one clapped. No one cried. There was only silence. The kind that fills the air when falsehood is finally outnumbered by truth. When every lens, every microphone begins to tremble at the weight of what can no longer be hidden. Later, as news agencies verified the leaks, as resignations flooded in and foreign diplomats quietly pulled their blinds shut, Ibrahim did not celebrate. He returned to the streets where the people waited, right where he'd left them, and said, "We have so much to mend." And in their eyes he saw it, resolve, not fear. And in that resolve was the beginning of something. The morning of the swearing-in was quiet, not marked by parades or sirens, but by the breathless stillness of a nation about to begin again. Across Ouagadougou, the sun climbed above the Place de la Revolution, casting light across red flags and corrugated rooftops. People gathered not for spectacle but for purpose. They didn't want a show. They wanted a sign. And inside the assembly, Ibrahim Traoré stood, not in polished uniform or shining boots, but in a worn olive coat, his boots dusty, his right hand still wrapped from the attack he'd barely survived. When the protocol team asked how he wanted to be introduced, he said, "No drums, no salutes, just let them see me." When he appeared at the top of the marble steps, the crowd didn't cheer. They inhaled, as if breathing in a moment they never expected to witness. As he moved forward, the silence broke. Not with clapping, but with one chant, rising from thousands of voices at once, unprompted, unstoppable. "He lives because we stood. We stand because he lives." It rolled like thunder through the square. Behind him, the council members, many of whom had stalled, doubted, or sabotaged this moment, stood pale, hunched under the weight of the truth finally revealed. Resignations continued, quiet and constant. But Ibrahim did not glance back. He faced the crowd, lifted one hand, and the chant stilled. He spoke, not with rage, but with the clarity of someone who had seen the other side and returned, shaped by fire rather than scorched by it. "I'm not here to name those who tried to stop this day," he said, voice bare and ringing through the plaza. "I'm here to tell you why they failed." And the silence that followed was full, not empty. The kind of silence that listens. "They failed because the oath I take today wasn't written in law. It was carved into this land by the hands that sheltered me, the prayers whispered over me, the children who warned me. My vow is already living in their acts of courage. Today, I just speak it aloud." Then, placing his left hand over his chest, his bandaged right hand raised, he recited an oath he had rewritten at dawn. One that spoke not of titles or tradition but of freedom, self-determination, and the duty to amplify every silenced voice. When he finished, he did not wait for applause. He walked down the steps and into the people, not as a figure to be idolized, but as a man carrying a truth worth touching. And in that moment, the nation was not being ruled. It was being seen. Across continents, newsrooms scrambled. Headlines shifted overnight from "failed transition" to "Africa's youngest survivor president defies the odds." In boardrooms far away, one diplomat whispered to another, "We misjudged him, again." The old guard had prepared for chaos. What they faced now was a return. And Ibrahim didn't retaliate. He didn't imprison or purge. He restructured. He opened the floor for public testimony, granted clemency to minor collaborators who came forward, and barred forever from public office those who remained silent. When asked in his first international interview why he didn't seek vengeance, he replied, "Because I don't want to rule a house in ruins. I want to rebuild it." From then on, no foreign envoy could meet him without remembering he wasn't a man who merely survived. He was a man who came back with purpose. His presidency began not with comfort but with conviction. Because the night they tried to end him became the night the people chose to protect him, and in that choice found their own strength. That was his legacy. Not that he wore the sash of leadership, but that he bore the scars of loyalty, and never forgot who kept him alive to wear them. Ibrahim Traoré didn't just survive the night of his attempted assassination. He rose from the ashes as a reminder that no gun, no plot, no lie can destroy a people's will when they choose to stand together. It wasn't chance. It was courage. If the story stirred something in you, stand with truth. Stand with resilience. Subscribe to the voice of Ibrahim Traoré. Like, share, and follow. For the stories the world tries to silence, and the voices we must never stop hearing. This isn't the end. It's only the beginning.